Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here. And as Leslie said, my interest in avalanches and avalanche safety came out of a passion for off-piste. And so I started about 25 years ago or so a thing called Henry's Avalanche Talk with the aim of helping people to have fun and be safe off-piste. And I consider myself an expert in avalanches and off-piste guiding and things, and I think I'm pretty good, and I'd like people like you all to think I'm pretty good, as my audience, for example. And that's why I, about 10 or 15 years ago, was fairly shocked when a friend of mine showed me an image of an avalanche that appeared on National Geographic and said, "Look at this idiot. He's just triggered this avalanche, and what an idiot." And I said, "Oh my God, Graham, that was me." And I tracked down the person who took the video, and it was a Swede, just usually a Scandi behind all, and some sort of scandal. And it was this Nicholas Alsteg who was doing an extreme video down film a number of years ago. And the thing about this was that I didn't do this on purpose. It was totally by accident. I heard there was a video out there somewhere, and I tried to keep it quite quiet. But once it came into the public eye, I felt it was actually probably a pretty good tool to use, because not only had I made an avoidable error there, a pretty stupid error, I was noticing during my teaching and training that a lot of accidents happen to people who, quote unquote, should have known better. They weren't applying their experience or knowledge. And the quick story about this is I was guiding for a extreme film myself at the time. It was the Egan brothers. It dates it a little bit, years and years ago, if any of you remember those Warren Miller guys. As you all know, the ski extreme films and everything are quite exciting to watch, but those of you who've been involved with filming know that it's a very boring process when you're actually doing them. So during this time, I was doing the filming. It was very boring, missing lots of nice turns, fresh powder turns on this particular day. The second I could get away with some of the members of the filming team, I shot out to an area here in what's known in the Val d'Isère area as the Grand Ballon. And I was getting all tracked out, and I wanted to get the last bit of untracked powder over here. I'd been warned by the ski patrol, as I teach people to do, chat, look at recent avalanche activity, chat to the local peace patrol, find out what's going on, and they didn't even really say much to me. They said, when I asked them what they thought of the conditions, they just showed me a probe and a shovel, and they said, "We're ready, Henry." So this is something that is actually evolved within the international avalanche industry and expertise, safety milieu, if you like. I attend a lot of conferences, and as Leslie said, give papers and things. What's evolved over the last 20, 30 years, I've noticed, is a move away from knowing about crystal evolution, snow crystal metamorphosis, stability tests and things like that, to almost like a psychology, behavioral science focus. And based on why people like me, this avalanche expert, and indeed most avalanche accidents happen to people who should have known better. And accidents like this right here, where there was obvious terrain traps below here, recent avalanche activity, and still experienced people went in above this area and set off the avalanche. So for me, and what's arisen through research in the last 10, 12 years in the international avalanche community is a number of explanations as to why 75–80% of these accidents that happen are happening to people with at least a pretty good amount of training. And that's what in the context of today's talk, explain what these human factors are, because it comes down to just human factors, avoidable errors, and present you a model that I've come up with to help you to have a good time off-piste yourself, but and also with clients, and keep it safe. So for the next sort of 15 minutes or so, I'd like to run through quickly what the problem is, we stated the problem, and that is that the training isn't enough, knowledge about and risk management isn't enough. There's something more we need to know about human factors. So that's the problem. What I want to propose is some of the solutions that have been proposed within the international snow science and avalanche safety industry, and then have a question and answer for 15 to 20 minutes, comments, and talk about your experience with clients off-piste or going off-piste on your own, and how to keep things safe and have a good time out there. So the first thing for me, one of the origins of the problem of why these avoidable errors are happening to us is that research has shown in the last 5-6 years that most of the time an unstable slope won't avalanche. And I've even read a paper in the last couple of weeks that shows that in fact on most days you can go over an unstable slope 1,000 times and you'll only trigger one deadly or potentially deadly avalanche. Which makes me stand back and think, this is one of the challenges that I've been up against over the last 25 years. Every time I say it's going to be really unstable, like, you know, many of you work in the northern French Alps. I don't know if you remember the beginning of January last year, really unstable, a dump of snow, people just going out everywhere, nothing happened. Well, only a few people were killed, which is a lot and a little at the same time. You know, to the people who were killed and they were in the accidents, that's a lot. But and I'm sure all of you will agree that this crazy stuff that people do, even on really unstable days, and get away with it is amazing. What is this all about? So we're not going to look at the mechanics and why that is that unstable slopes most of the time won't release. But we're going to look at the effect it has on us and our risk management for ourselves and with groups off-piste, and how to temper what I call these human factors that have come up not only in the avalanche and off-piste world, but also in other areas, aviation, medicine, military. They're called human factors that get in the way of us using our experience and knowledge, our better judgment in potentially deadly situations. So we've often heard that powder fever has led skiers and snowboarders, people like us, to not focus on safety, but focus on getting on that slope before it gets tracked out, for example. And that is a human factor that's called scarcity. And according to recent research, this is one of the main killers for people like us who have a fair amount of experience, is that our unconscious, and this is human factors that go across the board again. It's shown to cause huge errors in medicine, in military, and financial markets. This idea of competition and ruling out any other safety mitigation that would be appropriate for a situation. And what that leads to as well is a thing called social facilitation, which is a fancy way of saying the herd instinct. And so there's two human factors that are mainly responsible for avalanche accidents and deaths for people who are pretty experienced, like us. And this is research that was started by a guy named Ian McCammon in 2002. And so it doesn't matter how much we've learned about weak layers, steep slopes, terrain traps. We've all learned about that. What comes down to is that the decisions that were made by experienced people were not around avalanche education or safety. The decisions, despite the fact that there were obvious clues on this particular day, or almost all the time when there's an accident, there's clues around that point towards instability and danger. We've pushed those aside, and the dominating things that we base our decisions on are this thing called scarcity, getting getting that slope before it gets tracked out, or getting there before that other group gets there so we can put the first tracks on there. And this social facilitation, the herd instinct, or it can also be that we feel much more comfortable when there's other people around. And I would challenge anyone to say that they don't feel more comfortable going to a slope that already has a few tracks or a group around it. It's just human nature. And so those are the two killers, but there's 6 of them, of these traps that were identified by Ian McCammon, who started this human factors research in the snow and avalanche, off-piste and backcountry world. And we're going to look at them right now. And if you have questions and comments and things like that, I'm going to get through this in the next sort of 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So these 6 things, they should have known better. Well, of course they knew better, but they weren't applying their experience or knowledge on the days that there were accidents. So each one of these factors, these human factors, were identified in a research project that was done, whatever it was, 13, 14 years ago, by Ian McCammon in scenarios in North America mainly, where experienced people got into an avalanche and there was a death. And there was also clues as to why, very definite clues as to why they shouldn't have gone into the particular area that they were in and had the accident. So one of the main traps of the 6 was familiarity, and that's something that we come up against all the time too, is that our past actions guide our behavior in a familiar setting. And but this can be a trap when the hazard changes, but the setting remains familiar. And so we go into an area that we've been into all the time, nothing really ever happens, but we fail to see that there's been recent avalanche activity on similar slopes practically all the day. That's an example. So each one of these traps is a trap because they work for us in our everyday life. They work very, very well for us. Like if we get into a familiar setting, a lot of times we don't even have to think, and we just do things. And so that's and local knowledge, for example, is a really good thing for us because we know the mountain, we know the best areas to go into, and in most cases that's a very good thing. But it can be a trap when we're not thinking and we're not noticing when there's something different in that area, like recent avalanche activity pointing to it being unstable on those types of slopes. Social acceptance is something that works for us generally in our everyday life. If we're accepted by our peers, it helps us to move ahead in our careers and our jobs and things like that. It helps us to get jobs in ski schools that we wanted to get a job in, or work people we wanted to work with. If we're accepted by our peers, clients see that and they're more likely to hire us. But it becomes a trap when we're not we're either showing off, for example, and trying to impress others, or actually in a situation when we're not speaking up when someone who's really quite experienced is making a decision that we doubt. I work with a doctor, for example, in surgery, who says that on a fairly regular basis, the wrong kidney will be taken out, for example. And someone knew, a nurse or a student doctor knew about that, but they were afraid to speak up. And I say it's frequent. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens enough so that it's an alarming aspect of in healthcare. So commitment and consistency. There's another one. Commitment, we all know, is great in sports, for jobs. We're rewarded for commitment. But if we are committed from the beginning of the day, we've told our clients we're going to go, we're going to tour up or ski a specific slope. In our minds, we've built expectations for them that they're going to go there for us, and we feel that if we change our mind, maybe we're going to seem a little wishy-washy or not as professional as we should. But that's a problem if we're ignoring obvious signs. And this has been shown with all these other things to be reasons why experienced people like us will make really stupid mistakes or silly mistakes. The expert halo is another one where we very easily someone could come out. Maybe one of you come to the Val d'Isère area where I live, and bring some clients from Morzine or wherever you are, and think, okay, well, I'm going to go with Henry because he really knows this area. I've done a couple thousand days off-piste in the Espace-Quilly, so you're listening to what I'm saying, but I make a mistake, and you don't speak up, and that's another reason for big accidents to happen. And in fact, the expert halo is even more of people attributing someone skills that they have and they don't really have them, just because they're the loudmouth at the end of the bar, or they're wearing they're wearing the right kit, and people will defer their decisions to them. It's something we do naturally all the time. How many times have you said, "Oh, well, I don't want to make a decision about a restaurant to go to, or how we're going to go to this place or whatever," and you leave it to someone else? It's just much easier to do that, and that has been identified as a reason why accidents happen to experienced people as well. And we also looked at the social facilitation, the herd instinct. If other people are there, well, it must be okay, and especially the scarcity. Get there before it gets all tracked out. So that's a summary of these human factors. They're called heuristic traps. Heuristics are basically just like biases and judgments of things that actually work for us in our everyday life, work very well for us in our everyday life, but become traps in the mountains for reasons that I just stated. And there are some solutions. So knowing about this is not really enough. So training on avalanches, as I said before, isn't enough. And knowing about these traps isn't enough. According to the research over the last 10 years in accident analysis. So what I've done is taken this a step further and looked at this person named Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize in economics. He's a behavioral psychologist. Basically says that even financial people who work in the financial world make intelligent, well-trained and educated people make stupid mistakes on a really regular basis, and it leads to financial crises. And he's basically accepted as the standard, and his theories are accepted as pretty much the cutting edge within the industry of behavioral sciences, and even as applied into economics and other areas as well, military, medicine, etc. So he basically says that we have generally two ways of thinking, and there is system one, which is unconscious biases or stereotypes, judgments, where we make quick assessments and assumptions. And that works really well for us in our everyday life most of the time. But in an environment like I just stated, where you can go over, make wrong decisions like 999 times, you're not getting the feedback from the environment out on the mountain. You can get led astray by making these quick decisions, because what's worked for you over the last sort of year or two or something like that might not have been what you making the right decisions. So what he suggests is one of the best ways to avoid avoidable errors is to try to keep working into a thing we call system 2. So this is the other general area that we function in, and it's basing decisions on facts and evidence, and trying to make a rational view of what's going on. But the problem with this is that this takes time and it takes energy, and it's also very hard to get into system 2, again, when you're out there having fun, and most of the time when you make a mistake or make a bad decision, you're going to get away with it. So you start thinking, well, maybe it doesn't matter if there's recent avalanche activity on similar slopes and we're above a cliff or a hole or another terrain trap. But it's very, very important. It's been shown in off-piste skiing that we revisit regularly system 2. Stand back and have a rational approach to risk management, and that starts with recognizing when people in the group, if you're with mates, are in the system 1 area, making quick decisions and just based out of emotion, and seeing it yourself. If you're making a decision to go to a slope because you want to please your clients and yourself. Because if you wait much longer, it's going to get tracked out, that type of thing. And what you want to try to do is keep that human factor in check by revisiting the system 2 as much as possible. So how do you do that? Well, it's been shown that, as I've mentioned a few times in the last few minutes, that training is not enough. You need easily applied, what they call decision tools. And decision tools are basically like checklists and things. And I mentioned that in other areas of endeavor, professions, and activity, when they're confronted with the same problems, that intelligent, well-educated people do stupid things on a regular basis. And you might have heard it, for example, in the UK, that surgeons have been guilty on a fairly regular basis of removing the wrong limb in an amputation, for example, like I mentioned, working with a urologist who's actually applying the model that I'm going to show you in a minute to his surgery, because he's seen and known of so many cases where like the wrong kidney was removed. And so this is a guy named Atul Gawande, who I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he worked with the WHO, the World Health Organization, and an aviation group to set up checklists for surgeons so they don't do these stupid things. And a lot of it comes down to the very basics, like making sure that the patient is the right patient on the operating table according to the notes for the doctor, that they're not doing the wrong operation on the wrong person. And that reflects a lot of mistakes that have been made over the years, and how they're trying to correct it. In fact, every surgeon now in the UK has to use this WHO checklist before they do an operation, and in order to avoid these avoidable errors. And it's shown a huge drop in now, as it started being applied about 7-8 years ago, huge drop in these patient avoidable deaths and avoidable harm to patients. So it's been shown that the checklist, simple checklists, do work. And one thing, I had a little quote by him that in the vast majority of mistakes in surgery are very basics, and everybody knew the basics, but they weren't applied. So what I've come up with is a structure that we can talk about. That is a memory aid checklist kind of a thing, and the answer is well. The first thing we do is we ask if the question, is it safe out there, and in terms of off-piste and avalanches, and the answer is that there's 3 answers to that question, and it depends on where you go and when, how you go down or up, and how well prepared you are. And under each one of these answers to the question, is it safe out there, I have 3 key points. And I'll have a summary slide at the end here that I'll also post on my website. But the first one is slope angles of 30 degrees. We've all heard about these different things, the avalanche rating in the bulletin, and recent avalanche activity. So these are the basics, and then the second answer to the question, is it safe out there, it depends on how you go down or up. The first one is terrain traps, islands of safety, and one at a time or distances. And then the third answer to the question, is it safe out there, depends on how well prepared you are, how well you are prepared for a crisis, most specifically, having your safety equipment, having the training on how to use it, and then having a sense of, and at least knowing that there's human factors at work, that it is very possible that you might not be applying these basics due to these human factors that will distract you, like getting onto that slope before it gets tracked out. And some other things I'd like to revisit with you too. Maybe your clients saying, "Oh, come on, listen, can we get some better snow?" Or implying that maybe the places you've been taking them, they could probably have done on their own, or something like that. And those types of things will push us to go beyond and not apply the basics. But what I did is, and I teach people, like last night when I was in Chamonix, so I took those 3, that question, and then 3 answers: where you go and when, how you go down or up, and how well prepared you are for a crisis. It took me 5 minutes to write this up with each of the key points underneath them. That was scribbled. I have very bad handwriting. So what I did for today is summarized it on 1 page. And this fits into, according to all of the research that I've been involved with and seen in terms of accidents that happen to experienced people, the best way to avoid it is having a simple little framework that you look at starting the day before in the morning and revisit. So you go you can revisit that system 2 of Daniel Kahneman as much as possible. The decisions being based on evidence and facts rather than emotion. And so that is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to go over. Plus choosing the right people to ski with for mates. I talk to a lot of people. The general public is choosing the people that you ski with, and making sure that they apply. They're in the same wavelength as you are, or in the same kind of spirit of having fun and keeping safe. Because I strongly believe that the safer you keep things, out on the mountain, the more fun you have and the more you can push things. And that's why one of our big slogans is safety is freedom. But for us, and what I'd like to do is discuss with you, is a different dynamic when we have clients. The pressure, not necessarily from the clients, but also the pressure we put on ourselves to please our clients. Because all of us want to end up having days like this, and making sure that we keep it safe. There was a little cool music with this, but I seem to have lost it. But anyway, the images speak for themselves. They sing for themselves.
Oh, thank you, Henry. Is that?
Yeah, sorry.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I was going to do is have some questions and comments for the next, we have about 15 minutes or so. Is that all right? Yeah?
Yeah.